The day Earth changed forever started like any other. People went about their lives, unaware that everything was about to shift. In a small town in South Korea, Min Jun woke up early, as he always did. He put on his uniform and headed to the nearby space center, where he worked as an astronaut. Min Jun loved his job. He had dreamed of space since he was a little boy, looking up at the stars from his backyard. Now, at 32, he had already been to the International Space Station twice. But today was going to be different. Today, history would be made. As Min Jun walked into the control room, he could feel the excitement in the air. Everyone was talking in hushed voices, their eyes wide with wonder. His friend and fellow astronaut, Su Yan, ran up to him. "Min Jun, you won't believe what happened," she said, her voice shaking with excitement. Min Jun looked at her, confused. "What's going on?" Su Yan took a deep breath. "We received a message. From space. From aliens." Min Jun's jaw dropped. He had always believed there was life out there, but to have proof, it was beyond his wildest dreams. "Show me," he said. Su Yan led him to the main screen. There, in glowing letters, was a message in perfect Korean. "Greetings, people of Earth. We are the Zorak. We come in peace and wish to establish diplomatic relations. Please respond if you are willing to meet." The room was buzzing with activity. Scientists were analyzing the message, trying to figure out how the aliens had learned Korean. Government officials were on the phone, talking rapidly about how to respond. Min Jun stood there, taking it all in. He couldn't believe this was happening. Then he heard his name being called. "Min Jun, the president wants to speak with you," his boss said, holding out a phone. With shaking hands, Min Jun took the phone. "Hello. Min Jun, this is the president. We've decided to respond to the alien message, and we want you to be Earth's ambassador." Min Jun nearly dropped the phone. "Me? But why?" "You're our most experienced astronaut, and you have a calm and friendly demeanor. We believe you're the best person to represent Earth." Min Jun's head was spinning. This morning, he was just an ordinary astronaut. Now, he was about to become the first human to make contact with an alien species. I'm honored," he managed to say. "What do you need me to do?" "We're going to send a response accepting their invitation. We want you to lead a small team to meet with them. Can you do this?" Min Jun took a deep breath. He thought about all his years of training, all the times he had imagined this moment. "Yes, I can do this." Over the next few days, Earth was in a frenzy. The news of alien contact spread quickly. Some people were excited, others were scared. Scientists worked around the clock to prepare for the meeting. Min Jun and his team, which included Su Yan and 3 other experts, trained hard. They learned everything they could about first contact protocols and diplomatic relations. Finally, the day came. The Zorak had sent coordinates for a meeting point in space, not too far from Earth. Min Jun and his team boarded their spacecraft, ready to make history. As they lifted off, Min Jun looked out the window at the Earth below. It looked so small, so fragile. He realized that he wasn't just representing his country anymore. He was representing all of humanity. The journey to the meeting point took several hours. As they got closer, they saw it. A massive spaceship, unlike anything they had ever seen before. It was shaped like a giant snowflake, with glowing blue lights all over it. "Look at that," Su Yan whispered in awe. Min Jun nodded, unable to speak. This was it, the moment that would change everything. Their ship docked with the alien vessel. Min Jun took a deep breath and looked at his team. "Ready." They all nodded, their faces a mix of excitement and nervousness. The airlock opened. Min Jun stepped forward, his heart pounding. He was about to become the first human to meet an alien species. As the door slid open, he saw them. The Zorak. They were tall, with shimmering blue skin and large dark eyes. But what struck Min Jun most was their arms. Instead of hands, they had what looked like tentacles. One of the aliens stepped forward. It spoke, its voice sounding like music. "Welcome, humans. We are the Zorak. We are honored to meet you." Min Jun smiled and bowed slightly. "The honor is ours. We come in peace and friendship." And with those words, a new chapter in human history began. The universe had suddenly become a much bigger, more exciting place, and Min Jun was right at the center of it all. Min Jun and his team stepped onto the Zorak ship. They looked around with wide eyes, amazed by what they saw. The inside of the ship was beautiful. The walls seemed to glow with a soft blue light. It was like nothing they had ever seen before. The Zorak leader, who called himself Zal, welcomed them. "We are happy you have come," Zal said. His voice was gentle and musical. "We have much to share with each other." Min Jun nodded and smiled. He noticed that the Zorak kept looking at his hands. They seemed curious, but also a bit nervous. Min Jun wondered why. Su Yun, always the scientist, was already asking questions. "Your ship is amazing. How does it work?" she asked. Zal's large eyes blinked. "We use the energy of stars," he explained. "It is very efficient." As they walked through the ship, Min Jun noticed something strange. The Zorak didn't seem to have any buttons or controls. Everything in the ship responded to their touch or their voice. "How do you control your ship?" Min Jun asked. Zal waved one of his tentacle-like arms. "We connect with our minds," he said. "Our ship is part of us." The human team was amazed. This was technology far beyond anything on Earth. Soon, they arrived at a large room. It looked like a meeting room, with a big round table in the center. But instead of chairs, there were soft, cushion-like things. "Please, sit," Zal said. "We have prepared a meal to welcome you." The humans sat down carefully on the cushions. They were surprisingly comfortable. Then something even more surprising happened. The table began to change color. Slowly, different foods appeared on its surface. "Wow," Su Yan whispered. "Is this some kind of advanced 3D printing?" Zal tilted his head, confused by the term. "It is how we prepare food," he said simply. The humans looked at the food. It was colorful and smelled good, but it didn't look like any food they knew. There were no forks or spoons. The Zorak used their tentacle arms to pick up the food and eat it. Min Jun picked up a piece of something that looked like a blue fruit. He used his hand to bring it to his mouth. Suddenly, he noticed all the Zorak were staring at him. They looked scared. "Is everything okay?" Min Jun asked, putting the food down. Zal seemed to shake himself. Yes, he said quickly. "Please, enjoy the meal." The humans ate carefully. The food was delicious, with flavors they had never tasted before, but they couldn't help noticing how the Zorak watched them, especially their hands. After the meal, Zal stood up. "We would like to show you our world now," he said, "if you are ready." Min Jun and his team nodded eagerly. They had seen pictures of the Zorak homeworld, but to see it in person, that was a dream come true. They went to a large window. As they watched, the view changed. Suddenly, they were looking at a beautiful planet. It had 2 moons and rings like Saturn. The surface was mostly purple and green. "Welcome to Zorak Prime," Zal said proudly. The ship began to descend. As they got closer, they could see cities. They looked very different from Earth cities. The buildings were round and seemed to grow out of the ground. There were no straight lines anywhere. "Your cities are beautiful," Min Jun said. "They look so natural." Zal seemed pleased. "We believe in living with nature, not against it," he explained. The ship landed softly in a large open area. It looked like a park, with strange purple trees and blue grass. A crowd of Zorak had gathered to see them. "Are you ready to meet our people?" Zal asked. Min Jun took a deep breath. This was it, the real first contact between humans and Zorak. He looked at his team. They all nodded. "We're ready," Min-Jun said. The door of the ship opened. Min-Jun stepped out first, blinking in the bright light of the Zorak sun. The air smelled sweet and strange. The crowd of Zorak was silent at first. Then they began to make a soft humming sound. It was their way of cheering. Min-Jun smiled and waved. The crowd went silent again. They were all staring at his hand. Min-Jun lowered his arm slowly. He turned to Xal, confused. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked quietly. Xal's large eyes blinked rapidly. No, he said, but he sounded nervous. "It's just your hands. They are very interesting to us." Min-Jun looked at his hands, then at the tentacle arms of the Zorak. He realized that this might be more complicated than they had thought. As they walked towards the welcoming party, Min-Jun couldn't help but wonder. What was it about human hands that seemed to fascinate and frighten the Zorak so much? The next few days were busy for Min-Jun and his team. They had many meetings with Zorak leaders. They talked about Earth and learned about Zorak Prime. It was exciting, but also tiring. One morning, Tal came to them with a new idea. "We would like to see how you live on Earth," he said. "Can you show us some of your customs?" Min-Jun thought this was a great idea. "Of course," he said. "We'd be happy to." They set up in a large room. The walls could change to show different pictures, like a giant TV. Min-Jun decided to start with something simple: how humans eat. "On Earth, we use tools to eat our food," Min-Jun explained. He held up a fork and a knife. Like this. He demonstrated how to cut food with the knife and pick it up with the fork. The Zorak watched closely. They seemed amazed by how Min-Jun's fingers moved. Next, Su-Yun showed them how humans write. She took out a pen and paper. "We use our hands to make marks that represent words," she said. She wrote her name in Korean. The Zorak leaned in close to watch. When Su-Yun finished, one of the Zorak reached out a tentacle arm to touch the paper. "Fascinating," the Zorak said. "Your hands allow you to make such precise movements." Min-Jun noticed that the Zorak seemed both impressed and nervous. He decided to show them something fun next. "Now I'll show you a game we play on Earth," Min-Jun said. He took out a deck of cards. "It's called Go Fish." He explained the rules and started to deal the cards. But as he shuffled the deck, fanning the cards between his hands, he heard gasps from the Zorak. Min-Jun looked up. The Zorak had backed away. Their eyes were wide, and they were making a low humming sound that Min-Jun had learned meant they were upset. "What's wrong?" Min-Jun asked, putting down the cards. Zal spoke, his voice shaky. "Your hands, they move so fast, so precisely. It's unsettling." Min-Jun frowned. He hadn't meant to scare them. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't realize it would upset you. Should we stop?" Zal seemed to think for a moment. Then he shook his head. "No, please continue. We need to understand each other, even if it's difficult." So they kept going. Min-Jun and his team showed the Zorak more Earth customs. They demonstrated how to tie shoelaces, how to use chopsticks, and even how to play a simple tune on a small keyboard. With each demonstration, the Zorak seemed to grow more amazed and more nervous. They whispered to each other in their own language, which sounded like soft music. Su-Yun noticed this too. During a break, she pulled Min-Jun aside. "Have you noticed how they react to our hands?" she asked. Min-Jun nodded. "Yes, it's strange. They seem fascinated, but also scared. I wonder why." Su-Yun's eyes lit up. That was her "I have an idea" look. "I'm going to do some research," she said. "There has to be a reason for this." As the day went on, Min-Jun tried to use his hands less. He didn't want to scare the Zorak. But it was hard. He hadn't realized how much he used his hands for everything. At the end of the day, Saul came to speak with Min-Jun. Thank you for showing us your ways, he said. It was educational. Min Jun smiled. I'm glad. We're learning a lot about you too. Zal hesitated, then asked, Min Jun, may I ask you something? Of course, Min Jun said. Your hands. Are all humans able to do such things with them? Min Jun was surprised by the question. Yes, pretty much, he said. Some people are more skilled than others, but all humans have hands like mine. Zal made a sound that Min Jun couldn't understand. Was it fear? Awe? He couldn't tell. I see, Zal said finally. Thank you for your honesty. As Kahal left, Min Jun couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The Zorak were hiding something. But what? That night, as Min Jun lay in his bed, he thought about the day. He looked at his hands. They seemed so normal to him. But to the Zorak, they were something different, special, maybe even dangerous. What is it about our hands that scares them so much? He wondered aloud. He fell asleep still thinking about it, not knowing that soon he would get his answer. And it would change everything. A week had passed since the humans arrived on Zorak Prime. Things were going well, but there was still a strange tension whenever the Zorak saw human hands in action. Tonight was special. The Zorak had planned a formal dinner to honor their human guests. Min Jun and his team dressed in their best clothes. They wanted to make a good impression. The dining hall was beautiful. The walls glowed with soft colors that changed slowly. The table was long and made of something that looked like glass, but felt warm to touch. Min Jun sat next to Zal. Su Yun was across from him. The rest of the team and several important Zorak filled the other seats. This is lovely, Min Jun said to Zal. Thank you for your hospitality. Zal's large eyes blinked happily. We are glad you are enjoying your stay, he said. The food appeared on the table, just like it had on the spaceship. It still amazed Min Jun how the Zorak could do this. As they began to eat, Min Jun noticed the Zorak watching them closely. He tried to be careful with his hands, using slow movements. Su Yan was deep in conversation with a Zorak scientist. So, your species evolved from sea creatures? She asked, fascinated. The Zorak nodded. Yes, our ancestors lived in the deep oceans of our world. Min Jun listened with interest. It explained why the Zorak had tentacle arms instead of hands. He wondered if that was why they found human hands so strange. The dinner was going well. Everyone was relaxed and talking. Min Jun started to think maybe the hand issue wasn't such a big deal after all. Then it happened. Min Jun reached for his drink, but he misjudged the distance. His hand hit the glass. It tipped over, spilling the bright blue liquid. Without thinking, Min Jun's hand shot out. His fingers moved fast, grabbing the glass in midair. He caught it before a drop could spill. It all happened in a second. Min Jun smiled, relieved he had caught the glass. But then he noticed the silence. Every Zorak at the table was staring at him. Their eyes were wide. Some had pushed back from the table. The air felt thick with tension. Min Jun slowly put the glass back on the table. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't mean to cause alarm. But the Zorak didn't seem to hear him. They were all looking at his hands. Some were making that low humming sound that meant they were upset. Zal stood up suddenly. I think we should end the dinner here, he said. His voice shook. Min Jun was confused. But it was just an accident. I caught the glass. Nothing spilled. That's the problem. Another Zorak said. The speed. The precision. It's not natural. Min Jun looked at his team. They seemed just as confused as he was. Su Yan tried to calm things down. We don't understand, she said. Can you explain what's wrong? But the Zorak were already leaving the room. They moved quickly, almost like they were running away. Soon, only Zal was left with the humans. He looked at them, his eyes full of something that looked like fear. We We need time, Zal said. Please return to your rooms. We will talk tomorrow. With that, Zal left too. The humans were alone in the big dining room. What just happened? One of the team members asked. Min Jun shook his head. I don't know, but I think we just made a big mistake. Su Yun stood up. Her face was serious. I've been doing research, she said. I think I know what's going on, but you're not going to like it. Min Jun looked at her. Tell us, he said. Su Yun took a deep breath. I found some old Zorak stories. Legends, really. They talk about ancient enemies, beings that came from the stars. What kind of beings? Min Jun asked, though he had a feeling he knew the answer. Beings with 5 fingers, Su Yun said quietly. Beings that could move faster than the eye could see. Beings that brought death and destruction wherever they went. The room was silent as everyone took in what Su Yun had said. Min Jun looked at his hands. He thought about how the Zorak had reacted to them from the start. It all made sense now. They're not just scared of our hands, he said slowly. They're terrified of what we might do with them. The team looked at each other. They had come to make friends. But now, it seemed they might have made enemies instead. As they walked back to their rooms, Min Jun couldn't help but wonder, could they fix this? Or had humanity's first contact with aliens already gone terribly wrong? The next morning, Min Jun and his team woke up feeling worried. They didn't know what would happen after last night's dinner. Would the Zorak still want to be friends? As they ate breakfast, Su Yun shared more of what she had learned. I stayed up late reading the old Zorak stories, she said. It's really interesting. Min Jun looked at her. Tell us everything, he said. Su Yun took a deep breath and began. Long ago, the Zorak weren't the only intelligent life in this part of the galaxy. There was another species. The stories call them the 5-fingered ones. The team listened closely. They all knew she was talking about beings like humans. These 5-fingered ones were very advanced, Su Yun continued. They could build amazing things with their hands. They could fight in ways the Zorak couldn't understand. The stories say their hands moved faster than thought. Min Jun remembered how fast he had caught the glass last night. He understood now why it had scared the Zorak so much. What happened to these beings? One of the team members asked. Su Yun's face grew serious. The stories say there was a great war. The 5-fingered ones fought among themselves. In the end, they destroyed each other, but not before causing a lot of damage to other worlds, including the Zoraks. Everyone was quiet for a moment. It was a lot to take in. So, Min Jun said slowly, the Zorak are afraid of us because we remind them of these ancient enemies. Su Yun nodded. I think so. To them, our hands are weapons. They can't understand how something so dangerous can also create beautiful things. Just then, there was a knock at the door. It was Hal. Good morning, Saul said. He looked nervous. We need to talk. The team followed Axal to a meeting room. Other important Zorak were there too. Everyone looked serious. Zal spoke first. We have been discussing what happened last night. And other things. Min Jun stepped forward. Zal, we're very sorry if we scared you. We didn't mean to. Zal's large eyes blinked. We know, but we can't ignore what we've seen. Your hands, they are too much like the destroyers from our old stories. The 5-fingered ones, Su Yun said quietly. The Zorak looked surprised. You know of them? Sal asked. Su Yun nodded. I read your old stories. We understand now why you're afraid. Another Zorak spoke up. Then you understand why we can't trust you. Your hands are too dangerous. Min Jun felt his heart sink. Were they going to be sent away? Had they ruined the chance for friendship between humans and Zorak? But then he had an idea. Wait, he said. You've seen what our hands can do, but you haven't seen everything. The Zorak looked confused. What do you mean? Sal asked. You've seen how fast and strong our hands can be, Min Jun said. But you haven't seen how gentle they can be, how they can heal and create, not just destroy. He turned to his team. Su Yun, do you have your medical kit? Su Yun nodded and went to get it. When she came back, Min Jun turned to the Zorak. I want to show you something, he said, something that might change how you see our hands. The Zorak looked at each other. Finally, Zal nodded. Show us, he said. Min Jun took a deep breath. He knew this was their last chance to make things right. To show the Zorak that human hands weren't just tools of destruction, but also instruments of healing and creation. As he opened the medical kit, he hoped that what he was about to do would change everything. It had to. The future of human-Zorak relations depended on it. Watch closely, Min Jun said. I'm going to show you what human hands can really do. Min Jun opened the medical kit. The Zorak watched closely, their large eyes full of worry and curiosity. First, Min Jun said, I want to show you how our hands can heal. He took out a small cut on his arm that he had gotten earlier. It wasn't serious, but it was perfect for what he wanted to show. See this cut, he asked. The Zorak nodded. Min Jun then took out some antiseptic and a bandage. With careful, gentle movements, he cleaned the cut and put the bandage on. Our hands can hurt, yes, he said, but they can also heal. We use them to take care of each other when we're sick or injured. The Zorak watched in silence. They seemed surprised by the gentleness of his movements. Next, Su Yan stepped forward. She had brought some clay with her. Now, she said, I want to show you how we create. Her hands moved quickly but softly. She shaped the clay, her fingers making small, precise movements. In just a few minutes, she had made a small statue of a Zorak. Our hands don't just destroy, Su Yan said. They also create beautiful things. She held out the statue to Xal. He took it carefully, looking at it with wonder. The other team members showed more things. One played a soft song on a small instrument. Another drew a picture of the Zorak world. As they finished, Min Jun looked at the Zorak. Do you see now? He asked. Our hands are tools. Like any tool, they can be used for good or bad. It all depends on how we choose to use them. The Zorak were quiet for a long time. They looked at each other, making soft humming sounds. Min Jun and his team waited nervously. Finally, Thonal spoke. We see what you're trying to show us, he said, but we are still afraid. Your hands are so much more capable than ours. How can we trust that you won't use them to harm us? Min Jun felt his heart sink. They were still afraid. What more could they do? Then one of the other Zoraks spoke up. Perhaps, it said, we could ask them to wear restraints on their hands while they're here. Min Jun was shocked. Restraints? He asked. But that would be like treating us like prisoners. The Zorak hummed louder. Some seemed to agree with the idea. It would make us feel safer, Fezal said. We could continue our talks without fear. Min Jun looked at his team. They all looked upset. He knew he had to say something. I understand you're afraid, Min Jun said, but asking us to wear restraints is not the answer. It goes against everything we believe in. We came here as friends, to learn from each other. If you can't trust us without restraints, then there can be no real friendship between our peoples. The room went quiet. The Zorak looked surprised by Min Jun's strong words. Zal's eyes narrowed. Are you saying you would end our talks over this? Min Jun took a deep breath. He knew his next words were very important. They could either save the mission or end it completely. I'm saying, Min Jun said carefully, that trust goes both ways. We trust you not to harm us with your advanced technology. We ask that you trust us not to harm you with our hands. The Zorak started humming again, louder than before. They seemed to be arguing among themselves. Su Yan whispered to Min Jun, what do we do if they insist on the restraints? Min Jun shook his head. I don't know. But we can't agree to it. It would set a terrible precedent for future relations between our species. As the Zorak continued to debate, Min-Jun and his team waited anxiously. The future of human-Zorak relations hung in the balance. Finally, Dal turned back to them. His face was serious. "We have made a decision," he said. Min-Jun held his breath. This was it. Would the Zorak choose trust or fear? Would they be able to move past their ancient terrors, or would the ghosts of the past destroy any chance of friendship in the present? As Xal opened his mouth to speak, Min-Jun knew that whatever came next would change everything. The room was silent as everyone waited for Xal to speak. Min-Jun felt his heart beating fast. Everything depended on what the Zorak would say next. Xal looked at the humans, then at his fellow Zorak. Finally, he spoke. "We have decided," Gal said slowly, "that we cannot ask you to wear restraints." Min-Jun let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. But Saul wasn't finished. However, Sal continued, "We are still unsure. We need more time to understand your hands." Min-Jun nodded. "We understand," he said. "What do you propose?" Zal's large eyes blinked. "We would like to see more of what your hands can do. Not just for a few minutes, but over time. Can you show us?" Min-Jun looked at his team. They all nodded. "Yes," he said. "We can do that." Over the next few days, the humans showed the Zorak many things. Su Yan taught some Zorak scientists how to use human medical tools. They were amazed at how precise the tools were. Another team member, who was good at cooking, showed the Zorak how to make earth foods. The Zorak were fascinated by the way human hands could chop, stir, and shape ingredients. Min-Jun spent time with Zorak children. He taught them simple earth games like rock, paper, scissors, and cat's cradle. The children were scared at first, but soon they were laughing and playing. As the days passed, Min-Jun noticed a change. The Zorak seemed less afraid. Some even started to look excited when the humans brought out new things to show them. One day, a young Zorak approached Min-Jun. "Can you teach me to draw?" it asked shyly. Min-Jun smiled. "Of course," he said. He spent the afternoon showing the young Zorak how to hold a pencil and make simple shapes. At the end of the week, Saul called for another meeting. The humans went, not sure what to expect. When they arrived, they were surprised to see many Zorak there. Not just leaders, but scientists, artists, and even some children. Zal spoke. "We have watched you this week," he said. "We have seen what your hands can do. And we have decided." Min-Jun held his breath. This was it. "We were wrong to fear your hands," Zal said. "Yes, they are different from ours. Yes, they can do things we cannot. But we see now that this is not a bad thing." A murmur of agreement went through the crowd of Zorak. "Your hands can create beauty," Saul continued. "They can heal. They can teach. These are not things to fear, but to admire." Min-Jun felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had done it. They had shown the Zorak the truth about human hands. "We would like to continue our talks," Zal said. "Not as potential enemies, but as friends. There is much we can learn from each other." Min-Jun stepped forward. "We would be honored," he said. "There is much we can learn from you too." Zal held out one of his tentacle arms. Min-Jun understood. He reached out and gently shook Saul's tentacle with his hand. The room erupted in the musical hum that Min-Jun now knew meant happiness for the Zorak. As Min-Jun looked around, he saw Zorak and humans talking and laughing together. Some humans were trying to use Zorak tools with their hands, while Zorak watched in amusement. A group of Zorak children were playing rock, paper, scissors in one corner. Min-Jun felt a tap on his shoulder. It was Su Yan. "We did it," she said, smiling. Min-Jun nodded. "Yes, we did. But this is just the beginning." He looked at his hand, then at the Zorak around him. What had once been a source of fear was now a symbol of friendship. As he watched a human teaching a Zorak how to write, Min Jun thought about the future. There would be challenges, of course, but he was sure that humans and Zorak would face them together, with open minds, open hearts, and yes, open hands.